So just a recap, throughout the whole curriculum, talk about the family as a system, and that just like a mobile that you see hanging from a ceiling, like where all of the things are hanging down and they're operating independently, but yet they're connected. That's that's what a system is. That we're individual, but we're all affecting each other, and we're all connected in a thing called a system. So we talk about addiction as a family disease. It's not just the person that is using, but that each member of the family is playing their role. And that often it's a multi-generational phenomenon. It didn't just start with this generation, or maybe even not the previous one. And that addiction affects at least 3 generations, even if somebody recovers. So recovery is just as challenging for family members as it is for the person in treatment. And oftentimes the family sends off the person that's using for treatment as if it's only their problem. But it's actually a problem of the system. If the family is going to support the person who's using, that everybody needs to do their own healing work. And so this culture of the family system is transmitted, and it affects everybody, and that we're having millions of interactions, small, tiny interactions, every day after day, month after month, and year after year. And so these patterns are very, very well inculcated into our personality. And a lot of it is unconscious. Like we don't realize that our family communicates in an idiosyncratic way, in a unique way. We think that's how everybody communicates, but it's absolutely true that each family communicates in its own idiosyncratic way. So the main way that we transmit these patterns, these family patterns, is through our communication, and that we often communicate the way that our parents communicated. So it's through both the words we speak and our body language. We get used to experiencing each other, and we can tell from a look or from a stance or very subtle cues how someone is feeling, or very subtle facial expressions. We get exquisitely attuned to each other, and then we react according to how we interpret somebody else's body language or words. And we also are very involved in speaking and listening and interrupting, and what words are used, and interpreting whether what's going on is safe or unsafe to us. And also it can be very reactionary. So rather than just saying that what we want to say, that often that it comes out in reaction to what somebody else is saying or doing. So we're not proactively asking for what we want, we're reactively acting in response to what somebody else is doing or not doing. These are communication roadblocks that actually came, I think, from a parenting program, PET, Parent Effectiveness Training. It's really old. It's like from the 70s or 80s. I've always liked it because I think a lot of these patterns are used very frequently, but we don't necessarily see them as a roadblock. And so the first step to having more effective communication is really realizing how ineffective our existing communication is. So the first one is warning and threatening. Something like, so threatening would be, you'll never step foot in this house again if you blank, blank, blank. Or you'd better stop it or else I'm out the door. Or moralizing and preaching. So the word should is usually present. You shouldn't feel that way. You should be doing this or that. The patience is a virtue you should learn. And the cognitive therapists call that shoulding on yourself or others. So the next one is advising and giving solutions. And I always say, before you start giving advice, make sure that you've been hired as a consultant, because usually our advice is unwanted. And it's so common that when we hear somebody say something, we have a better idea for the person, well, what I would do or what you should do, or let me suggest something a little bit better than what you could think of. And it's really actually putting down the person autonomy that we're talking to, like they couldn't figure it out for themselves. We all do it all the time. I know I do. So another one is persuading with logic or lecturing. Here's why you are wrong. Let me tell you all the reasons. So here are the facts. You can see this in the presidential debates, how demeaning that is to explain to somebody the reality of the situation. So that can be interrupting. It can be just talking on, not giving it, not that it's not a back and forth conversation. It's just a lecture. And the ever popular judging, criticizing, and blaming, that you're just lazy, this is your fault, you can never do anything right. And basically that we know the best way to be and that other people aren't measuring up. So then we can order or direct, stop it right now, right this minute. So it's more of an authoritarian stance that we can command other people to do what we want. So another one is name calling and ridiculing. You're just an idiot. It's so stupid to worry about what hasn't happened. Just acting like we're so much smarter than the other person. And then analyzing and diagnosing. So what's wrong with you is you drink too much. You're just saying that because you're tired. You don't really mean that. And you're saying that, but what you really mean is blank, blank, blank. So implying that whatever that a person is saying, you know what they actually mean. And if it's something that you don't want to hear, that you can diagnose why they're wrong. And reassuring and sympathizing, it might sound like it's supportive, but it's actually not. So, for example, if somebody is feeling sad or if somebody's grieving, saying stuff like, oh, well, they had a good life, or don't worry, this will pass, and you'll feel better, or cheer up. And it's not allowing somebody to just feel their feelings, just be in the presence of somebody, of you witnessing someone else's feelings, whatever they are. The next one is questioning or probing. So kind of like a lawyer, like putting somebody on the spot, like, why didn't you have him put in more flowers? Like, who were you with? Who were you talking with? What did you do last night? How do you think this is going to sit with me? So another, it doesn't maybe sound that bad, but it's a reaction rather than expressing a desire. And people hear it as criticism. And if you're being peppered with these kinds of questions, it's very intimidating. And it also implies a one-up and one-down power dynamic, that the one who's asking the questions has the right to ask the questions and force the other person to answer. Sarcasm and diverting is the next one. Sarcasm is saying the opposite of what you really believe. Like, why don't you try to run the world? You're so smart. You're not really meaning that they're so smart. You're really trying to bring them down a notch. And withdrawal. So withdrawal can be actually turning away and leaving the room. It can be also remaining silent and not putting your input into the conversation, just checking out. So I don't know if any of these might sound familiar. We're constantly bidding for each other's attention. And there's three ways that we respond to each other, actually four. So we can turn toward the person, which means that we're engaged. We can turn away from the other person, which is more like a passive exiting. Or we can turn against, which is an angry, defensive response. And the fourth is being empathically connected. And so having our clear boundaries, but still being empathically connected to the other person, no matter what they're saying, even if you don't have to agree with them. So these are some verbal phrases that we might say when we're in fight or flight and we're turning against. So you might say, you do the same thing, you did it first, you do it, not me. Or what you do is worse. You're inconsistent. Make up your mind, will you? I only did it in reaction to what you did. You go too far in the opposite direction. What you see as a problem in me is actually a problem in you. I have a right to do what I'm doing. So we're still on turning against, and some more examples. You should have told me. You should have told me sooner. You should have told me in a nicer way. You knew what you were getting in me, so you only have yourself to blame. You should try to be more accepting. You have unrealistic expectations. It's your problem, so you should take care of it. You had the problem long before you met me. You make the same complaint about everybody else, so that ought to tell you something. You're immature, you're weak, inadequate, you're too sensitive, you're crazy, you're dependent, you're a bottomless pit. I'm just your whipping boy. You're putting up a smokescreen. Mine is a minor infraction, which brings us to the real problem, which is that you always make such a big deal about everything. There's a book title that I love called Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me. You have a negative attitude. You just must enjoy being unhappy. You're trying to control me. Things have been so good between us lately. Why are you trying to ruin them? So those are all turning against. So more in the attacking mode. So turning away or stonewalling. That's not so. What are you talking about? Here's evidence I don't do that. I was just about to do that. I'm an innocent bystander. I'm just sitting here bothering nobody. What's the big problem? Why didn't you tell me before? I'm not a mind reader. I thought it was what you wanted. It's normal. It's a simple misunderstanding. We have different styles. There are extenuating circumstances. I know I haven't been very blank lately, but I have been sick, under a lot of pressure, etc., etc., etc. So it's like justifying our own behavior rather than, these are in response, right, to somebody saying something. You can tell like this isn't the first thing that's said. This is in response to somebody having a complaint or saying something. Self-accusing is a defensive response. It doesn't sound like it, but it is. So it's kind of like going against yourself. You're right, I blew it again. I keep letting you down. Maybe I'm just incapable of, I'm just not good at it. So it's sort of going helpless on them. The person who's talking is sort of rendered neutralized. Fixing. It's rushing past the problem to find a solution. All right, I'll fix it. What exactly do you want? I'll do it. I'll do what you want. I've improved. I'm trying. I can't change, so you'll have to accept it, and that's the solution. And withdrawing, putting it off. Can't we talk about this later? And exiting psychologically or physically. And these are from Dan Weil, who he's a really great writer about relationships. They're older books. This one is from After the Honeymoon, or these lists. So what does turning toward or staying engaged mean? It's really talking about our feelings and asking for what we want rather than criticizing what's not happening, asking for what we want. So it could be so this is a format for doing that, for making a complaint rather than condemning the person as a whole. So it might go like, when you don't take the garbage out, I feel, and then you look at the wheel. So maybe it's in the anger category, and then maybe it's in the mad or furious and rage. You know, these get more nuanced as you go out to the edge of the circle. So I feel violated because I am afraid I will be taken advantage of. And I request that you take the garbage out by Sunday night. And the person, by the way, has no obligation to do so. You make requests, and I don't know if you have noticed, but you don't have any control over what other people do. So you can only make requests, and then it's up to you how you want to feel in your life, whether you accept the outcome or not. Sometimes it's easier to take the garbage out yourself than be angry for the next 5 years. And maybe you say this every day for the next 5 years. Just keep being a broken record